Hello, Daniel. We are
Hello.
live at 9:35. Johnny Five is alive.
You're listening to Dan and Dave in the evening. We're going with your traffic report.
This is just going to be a expose, and it's just a retrospective of Short Circuit, the movie, and everything it's meant to me in my
It has
life.
been criminally too long since I've watched that movie, so
I couldn't even tell you how long it's been since I've seen that movie.
it's been at least
But
20 years, maybe
I
25.
yeah, that's probably legit for me. But I still do use the insult on the regular. Your mother was a snowblower, so that's my go-to insult. Cool, man. This should be the podcast episode 28.
Wow.
Throws in my mind every time I write that or type in the new number. I'm like, ooh, we're almost to the 30.
Wow.
It's kind of fun. The project of it's the project that no one cares about but us, but that's okay.
Yeah.
And that one guy sometimes.
Yeah. Well, what we're doing is we're saving others in close proximity to us from listening to our ramblings.
That's true. It is a service to humanity just because we get it all out and burst with each other for an hour and a
It's
half.
like
a week.
it's like when you
So
take
that's good.
inmates and you give them like exercise time and they can kind of like pump iron and like play basketball, kind of get some of that out so they're not like starting fights.
Yeah, it's good. You don't want to be in solitary. That's a lot of pent up aggression. That's not good for anybody in their
Yeah. Yeah.
body,
you end
mind,
up
and soul.
on, end
Negative.
up on like the weird part of YouTube, like weird,
Ooh,
you know.
the dark corners of 4chan.
There's an interesting little subculture that I know a couple of people who are into. That's like this weird,
Uh-oh.
like biblical prophecy kind of thing, but like not like ultra conservative like some of the people that we might know, but like, it's like an intersection. It's like the really like sheltered religious people found bedfellows with the really sheltered like UFO believer people.
Yeah.
And so they kind of just made a mishmash of the two. And so there's all this like the Bible code stuff and how like there's aliens in the Bible and all this kind of weird stuff. And there's like an entire DVD series about it.
Ooh.
It's pretty
That
wild.
sounds interesting. I would go down that rabbit hole for a
Yeah,
while.
I would love to hear about it from somebody who was like a real, like who was like really into it. You know what I mean? And watch them try to convince.
All right. Well, if you find a link, you send that to me in the chat. I want to see what's up with some of that.
Yeah, I'll see. I know a couple of guys who are into it. I'm gonna have to see if I can find some of their info. It makes the Kirk Cameron stuff look like normal by comparison. Like it's that far like past that in terms of like wacko. Interesting
Cool.
stuff. Anyway,
Oh, Kirk Cameron made he made the jump from Growing Pains to uber conservative, B-rate everything pretty seamlessly there. But
yeah,
whatever. I don't really know anything about Kirk Cameron other than that, so
that's about it. All I know.
that's all you got. Hey, officially the Britney Spears conservatorship is over. All done.
Yep.
She is 100% a free woman, ready to navigate through life like a healthy, well-adjusted adult.
She seems
So,
happy.
Let's see how she does. Yeah.
If you look at her Instagram, she seems like a.
Oh, I have not, but I will.
Well, Shayla sometimes shows it to me, and it's like she likes. I'm happy for Britney that she seems happy. Now she doesn't seem like the most well-adjusted person in the world, and which is understandable. I wish her the
Yeah.
best, but if you look at it, you're like, this girl could use some solid friends. That's all I can say.
Yes. She doesn't need someone to utterly control every aspect of her life. Just some guidance might be helpful. But that could be said to anybody, for everybody, huh? Little guidance here and there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's okay. I like to think we had a little part to play in that.
Yeah, we put it out there into the universe
We did.
by
Yeah.
jumping on an already moving bandwagon.
How do you think I got this t-shirt so fast, Dan? I didn't screen print this myself.
It was on Amazon.
It was there, just ready for the
Yeah.
taking.
Quick,
2 days
to the
later.
bandwagon. Springfield
Yes.
Isotopes have won their first game. Anyway,
I get weird looks with this shirt though. A lot of people still don't get it. That's okay. That's funny. I like it.
that's funny.
Pink is my color now. I'm turning the corner. Instead of all black, start working in pink.
I used to play a pink guitar back in the day when we started that country band about in like 2013. A buddy of mine bought this guitar, and it technically the color was burgundy mist, but it was basically pink.
was
And
pink.
so it was an amazing instrument. I mean, it was really high quality. I just never really entirely jived with the visual, you know. But it's just one of those things where it's like being a jacked up dude going to the gym wearing a pink shirt. You know, like who's gonna give you crap about it? You know.
Right.
So if you own it, you own it, right? But I don't know. It wasn't really my vibe. But
I've seen some really like sick looking pink drums. Not like they're like pink, but they're like marbled, kind of not starbursty, but I guess maybe like a pink starburst. It was cool.
sparkle.
Yeah, not really. No, it's not so much
Oh.
sparkly. It's more like I don't know. Just I can't explain it. It's not straight up pink. It's not sparkly. It's not sparkles. But this I don't know. They're cool. I would rock that, but I don't have the need to buy a whole new drum set probably ever again. So we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, every once in a while I get the urge to like fix up my drums and set them up like here in the garage, but then I'm like, I don't know. I don't need to. I mean, when am I gonna have time to play them like during the day when I'm not gonna like bother all the neighbors? But then it's like, well, the neighbors bother me,
Yeah,
you know. So
true.
it's like this is America, but I don't know.
I could see myself down the road when I have a more disposable income and a real spare room with nothing to do, buy like a really nice like Roland like TD 25 or 37 by that.
Yeah, those are
by
fun.
that era. Those things are sick. Like those are amazing nowadays. They're also very, very expensive. But then you can actually, put the headphones on and just play. Just hear click and clack. But other than that, it's not so bad.
I've thought about doing a hybrid setup with like some electronic drums, but then real cymbals.
Yeah.
You know, and then by the time you pipe it into your headphones, it like kind of sounds the same. But
Yeah.
you know, because the sound of cymbals can be blocked with walls. You
Correct.
know, so that
Yeah, it's
you're
not- that's
you're
not as
gonna
annoying.
upset a subdivision as much anyway.
True that. Musicians' problems.
Yeah. So I had this idea. We were talking last week. Like
Yep.
it's like we always crap on sort of the left side of the aisle, and I was like, well, maybe we should be a little bit fair because like neither one of us would probably self-describe as a conservative necessarily,
No.
but like, but that got me thinking like, well, what does that word even mean, right?
Yeah.
Because for every conservative that I know that like I would find myself aligned with, there'll be another one that'll be like, well, okay, hold on, that sounds a little crazy. It's hard to. I mean, I don't know of anyone like either personally or like of the personalities like on in the internet and stuff that is really somebody where it's like, okay, everything they think I agree with. Like there's nobody like
Sure.
that for me. So it's kind of one of these things where I think I find myself being like, I tell people like I'm sort of conservatarian, and that usually like it's a weird enough word that it sort of buttresses against people assuming that I'm some sort of Trumper or some sort of right wing whatever, because then that conjures all sorts of boogeymen in their head. But like I don't know. It's good, but if you tell somebody you're a libertarian, then they immediately think that you're like some weirdo, right? They have, because the regular people have this view of libertarians like, I don't even know what that would be, but like,
Yeah.
weirdo people who like don't believe in. They either think you're like Amish or something, or like they want it to be like the Wild West.
Right. I don't know what the term really means anymore. Anyway, or either. I don't know. Well, whatever. It's a weird term too. So like I would have considered myself a conservative Republican early on in my political thinking.
Yeah,
when I was
me too.
like early 20s and stuff like that. Haven't felt that way in a long time. But like even the guys that are more conservative leaning now, I don't even again know what that really means. Like I listen to a lot of dudes or read stuff or listen to people do interviews and stuff, and like like Ben Shapiro is like the biggest one, probably. Steven Crowder is another one.
Yeah.
But like those guys are both also libertarian leaning in a lot of ways, but not in a ton of ways.
But
like,
then they start to lose me a little bit at certain points.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, they don't go full bore with it. Not as far as you and I would. Certainly not as far as I would, and not as far as you would. But like, I would even struggle to understand what that term means. And like we were kind of saying it earlier, it's like calling someone a liberal. Like, oh, okay, good, I'm a liberal. Like, what does that mean? Like that can mean a million things, and being a conservative can mean a million things.
Yeah,
And
like
certainly
relative to your typical person who says I'm a conservative. Like you find a
Right.
person who has no qualms saying that phrase.
Yeah.
Relative to them, I would be a liberal.
me too.
I can just tell, like personality wise. So
So like I would think, I mean, maybe we just jot down some ideas of what a conservative would be. So conservative in the main is, I guess, even the term is kind of stupid. It's holding on to traditional values, I guess, is one way to do it. One way to think about it. And I'm not sure why. I think that's fair. Like saying like a slow moving social progress is a preferable thing to a fast moving social progress. And I don't think that's an unfair characterization. So
Ooh,
I
I
say
just had a thought. Go ahead.
like family value kind of thing. Like say, okay, so because conservatives would be family value, generally religious, Judeo-Christian, small government leaning.
In certain areas.
Yeah, only in certain, or in name only. Yeah, for sure, in only certain areas. Yeah, so that would be a good criticism, obviously. What else would be a conservative, quote unquote, value?
Belief in law and order, belief
Yeah.
in
Yeah, law and order.
trusting the system on the main,
Yeah. Trust in the right. Yeah. Admiration for and respect and yearning to.
I
an
would say,
idealist-
yeah.
I say
I would
like
say
an
a belief that
idealistic
overall
view.
the system works.
Yeah. Yeah. Law and order is good. Like belief in the Constitution, the history of the United States as like as a positive force in most ways.
I would say a belief in what they talk about the small government part.
Mm-hmm.
It's a belief in small government because it presumes the existence of other social fabrics. So, because when you say small government, to some people they think, well, that just means like Mad Max, right? No government, no law. But the conservative says, well, no, small government because the role of social safety net should be taken up by small communities, churches, whatever sort of groups you have that would serve that role. So
Yes.
that's how, right.
Right. I think overarching, that's a general.
They're generally pro-military, pro law enforcement.
Yep. Yeah. Like I would say socially, see, I would use the term conservative. I can't use the term to describe itself.
Yeah.
Socially, like,
Not interested in pushing boundaries.
yes,
Like morally,
traditional.
morally traditional. That might be.
Morally traditional, and that's
Yeah.
only even then that only goes back like 50 or 60 years. I don't know.
Well, right. Okay. So now we're getting into what I think is an interesting point, which is that this is something we talked about before, which is that liberal and conservative, to me, is also a personality spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you can have people, and this is like when I tell people, I'm like, I care much more about whether or not a person is cool to be around than I do whether or not I share all of their particular, policy viewpoints. So you can have somebody who's a conservative, quote unquote, in the way that they vote and in the way that they think things should be structured, their preference for how society works. But they can have a very liberal personality in the sense that they're very accepting, they're open-minded, they don't immediately recoil from change, right? And they kind of they like the idea of people kind of doing what they're doing and whatever, and so that's a conservative voter with a liberal personality trait, right? And then you can have the opposite of that, which is a person who always votes Democrat and always is interested in pushing progressive norm, pushing the boundaries of stuff and seeing where that goes. But obviously, you just go on Twitter. There are people like that who have very conservative. Their personality is conservative. They can't tolerate any any variation from what they think. They've already decided what the proper moral code for everyone is. If you didn't know the specifics of how they voted on a ballot, you would say, oh, that person's clearly a conservative, right?
Yeah.
Because they already know how things are supposed to be and they can't tolerate deviation. And so, I think that's an important distinction because it's like when we define, okay, so we're defining conservative now, but and we're using terms like, specifics, like viewpoints, tend to be against abortion and they're pro-military and like Second Amendment stuff. Like those are specific opinions.
Yes.
But like the definition of there's always, like in every society, there's a conservative like side and a liberal side.
Yeah.
And the conservative, literally the word conserving. So the type of people who are kind of like, well, let's not be too hasty here, right? So conserving is always a reaction to progress, the progressive side, which wants to change things kind of for change's sake. Yeah. So the two sides are always warring, and that dichotomy exists in every society, regardless of like the specific, which is why nowadays certain viewpoints that would used to be liberal viewpoints are now conservative viewpoints.
Correct.
Right. Like weed legalization. Well, that's pretty universal, I guess, amongst most people. Most people don't really care about that, but but
it wasn't that way for a long time. Certainly wasn't was not a conservative point of view by any stretch of the imagination.
You get this weird tension, right? Or like freedom of speech. You know what I mean? So like freedom of speech used to be a left-wing liberal talking point because conservatism was the law of the land, like in the mainstream, But now that left-wing values are the law of the land, now the conservatives are like, well, hold on, free speech is very important because they're the ones being silenced.
Yeah, so, that one's actually almost reversed. Like,
it's weird.
Yeah, the roles are reversed on that one, which, yeah, I know, but that gets your point that it's not the point of view necessarily. It's just the changing, arching structure of society. So when freedom of speech has gone the other way, now the liberals are concerned about freedom of speech and they want to harken back to the days where that didn't exist, more or less. In certain instances. And the conservatives are like, oh no, dude, complete freedom of speech. Everybody they want. It's like, wait, so that's
not what you would have said in 1980.
Yeah, but it speaks to what you say. It's the mindset and not the actual position that they're holding. It's right.
Which is why I think that most discussions of these kinds tend to go off the rails because people haven't agreed upon what they mean when they're talking, right? So, and correct. I think we talk about this, but like, the quadrants, right? There's liberal, conservative, then there's authoritarian and libertarian, right? So once you have that y-axis, now you can much more accurately describe a person. Because you could have somebody who's a conservative who I don't care what you do. I have how I live my life. I believe I'm going to church or a synagogue or whatever. And I don't do X, Y, and Z, but like that's their personal choice, right? So they're conservative, but they're liberal. Then you know what I mean? Then you have people who are supposedly liberal who just want to control everybody else in the world.
Right.
So, I guess the other example would be authoritarian up at the top. That's how you end up with like Soviet Russia and Nazi Germany. Right, the left and right wing examples of those things. So, yeah,
correct. Yeah, and that would just not that one. The one you said earlier. I'm not the authoritarian. The socially conservative in my general outlook in life, but very libertarian. The live and let live when it comes to how I interact with others or how I would vote, which. But then most people wouldn't consider a conservative wouldn't consider me a conservative or right wing just because of that.
Right.
Which I think is funny because how you actually live matters a hell of a lot more than how you vote. I think personally.
Yeah. And you can tell a lot about somebody by their tolerance for people who are different than they are.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like that, it's like a horseshoe thing. The further you get to the extreme of any one side, the more you can't tolerate even the mere existence of people who are on the other side. Mm-hmm. So, the more you dig your heels in and believe that this is the way society is supposed to be, whether it's a right-wing thing or a left-wing utopia, the only way to make that happen is with tyranny. Yeah. So, whether you're like, Soviet Bolsheviks or you're like Nazi fascists. They're very different in their philosophies, but at the end of the day, the only way for them to implement them is with violence and total control. So it's like, what's the difference? You know?
No, I agree. That's where that's why this becomes a difficult conversation for me, or it's just harder for me as I go through life, because I've been so far into the libertarian anarchist vibe, that like that's how I see stuff with it. I don't see the left and the right as much as the left and the right sees the left and the right. So like if your primary concern is human freedom and liberty and peaceful living, that kind of way, you get less hung up on the names, on the who's doing what. You just go, well, that's bullshit, don't do that. That's bullshit, don't do that. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. That's moral, that's immoral. But like the lines are so blurred in my mind already between what the left and the right is, or basically what their rhetoric says and what they purport to believe, and then how they actually act and how they actually vote, or what they kind of go for on the political angle. It's actually difficult for me now to go back to go, yeah, because I don't really know. I'm not plugged into those scenes anymore, and I don't know what they mean. That's when they say what they're talking about. I just can only react to what I think they're saying, what I think they mean, and definitely what they're voting for, or if they're a politician, what they're definitely proposing. So it's hard.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's unique to me, though. I don't know, because there's not like a huge. I mean, I guess there's a huge conservative movement, but like the Trump stuff wasn't a conservative movement by any stretch of the imagination. Although people that were conservative freaking love Donald Trump for sure, but Donald Trump like Trumpism inherently is not conservative. I don't think
it is in some ways, but
in some ways,
he's a populist first.
Yes, for sure.
Who just happened to use who he more closely aligns with some conservative values than he does. I mean, Donald Trump is definitely a liberal in his personal viewpoints.
And his personal stuff. Yeah, for sure.
Right. So, but he's a conservative when it comes to like, okay, there's what he said and there's what he did, right? So like,
build the wall, trade war with China, kind of thing.
His main thing was that he was against the insane tide that was happening. Yeah. So, for the millions of Americans who were sick of being just immediately labeled as racist deplorables, they go, okay, well, this guy, maybe there's a reason that drain the swamp was a resonant phrase. Mm-hmm. People like you and me and Joe Average across, Kansas and stuff. They're like, yeah, it's a bunch of blowhards up there in Washington. They don't know what they're doing. It's a swamp. He goes, we're going to drain the swamp. You can't blame people for having that being appealing. Right. Yeah. Now, I mean, it's the vessel through which that idea was delivered was a pretty crappy messenger. No question. Right. But yeah, I mean, he's a populist in the same way that Bernie Sanders kind of is. You promise people what they want and they'll look at you like you're some sort of savior. Yeah. Right. So for the people who follow Bernie Sanders, it's people who are disaffected against like the financial system and the bankers and all this kind of stuff. And like this pie in the sky, like, yeah, we're going to build a new thing. And and it's all going to be great. And we're like, all right, well, that sounds appealing. Of course, like with your Black Flag t-shirt and your $200,000 in useless student loans that you're just like the idea of a whole new society, where everything's free and paid for, like that sounds appealing. Right. But like the people that Trump appeals to, it's like, it's the same psychological vehicle. It's people who like, the plant closed, I had to get out a mortgage on the farm, or like people who drive F-150s out in the middle of somewhere, and it's like, what's he talking about? He's talking about, immigration. He's talking about bringing jobs back from China.
Yep.
He's talking about opposing, critical race theory and things that are trying to redefine the American story. So that's what that person is like. Yeah, that's what I want. Even though those things that he promised are impossible. How are you going to bring jobs back from China? Like you can't unring that bell, know? So, it's like, so.
Well, yeah, but like, just inherently in MAGA, make America great again. So like going back.
I wanted to do a whole show about how that's a horrible phrase.
Yeah, it is. But like, I can see where a conservative would jump onto that. To be like, okay, yeah, let's get back to where we were with the glory days where America made everything in the world. Yeah. Your jobs were secure as much as a job could be secured. Speaking your mind, you weren't, like you said, labeled a racist, or you weren't like just for being a white average dude in the South. Like
Right. No, I mean
like
it's no mystery why it was appealing, why it worked.
but that
but-
is. But I guess I'm agreeing with you that that is like I can see why conservatives latched onto that because that is a conservative bent, regardless of its efficacy.
But
or
it's so tone
legitimacy.
deaf, like because it
Sure.
clearly it's like it's the most it's a slogan designed to earn 51% of the vote.
Yeah.
It's not a slogan that's going to bring America together, right?
Yeah.
Because
sure.
like
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just like Build Back Better is a horrible slogan, right?
Right.
Because
It's the opposite. It's America was great. Let's make it great again.
whereas Build Back Better is like, no, America's horrible, and
Yeah,
after all of our policies made the COVID pandemic worse,
Yeah, we're
let's
gonna build
use this as an excuse to reshape it all.
Yeah,
It's like
right.
that's again, it's a slogan designed to reach exactly 51% of the populace.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah,
Slogans are
they're both horrible phrases, but
It's almost like bumper sticker logic. Isn't sound logic?
yeah. Well, I mean, the
would've never
problem with
thought
Make
that.
America Great Again is like anybody with any sense could have predicted. Well, yeah, that's going to alienate a lot of people. Anybody who lives in comes from a demographic where they're not necessarily feeling that American dream working in favor of them.
Right.
Like, obviously, that's going to ring false, especially when it's told to you by a 75-year-old rich white fat man
yeah.
who's, isn't the most compassionate person by any stretch. So that's obviously going to be that's going to fall on deaf ears for a lot of people, right? So,
Yeah. No, for sure. And the more we're talking about it, though, the more I feel like the disconnect between what's considered a conservative politician and what like Joe Blow, average American conservative, would consider as conservative is a huge disconnect. Always has been, always will be. Because I don't think that there's no conservative politician. I'm just going to leave it there. There's no they're all moving down the line. They don't, none of them really embark or embody conservative values. So maybe that's a thing that trips me up too, because I don't see those guys. And like that's the thing that conservatives will complain about. They'll be like, I voted for this guy, and he's doing this, and he's doing this, and he's doing this. I'm going to keep voting Republican, okay? Because I'm not going to vote. I'm not going to vote. I'm not going to be a Democrat. I can't vote for Democrats. So like, all right, let me vote for another Republican who says he's conservative. It's like, oh my God, he's doing more liberal stuff. Oh no, he's doing more socialisty stuff. Oh no, he's doing big government stuff. Oh, he's not promoting the values I like. Well, let me keep voting Republican for like 30 years. So like these guys that are on the, so what I'm saying is the political side of it. There's conservative stuff you would theoretically support. There are no conservative politicians. If there are, there's like three. Just like there's no true conservative. Like there's hardly any true like progressives or like socialists. I mean, even Bernie Sanders, whatever. But it's as close as you're gonna get. But like I think that's also part of the problem of trying to figure out what this is all supposed to mean. Because I think if you talk to your average voter, or think of it people in your life that you would know that are considered conservative, do they really like the people they vote for? Not really.
what do you mean by like?
Like, do they think they do a good job? Like, they're enthusiastic to vote for them because they're like, hell yeah, this guy represents or this girl represents me.
I
Votes
tend
the
not
way
to
I like
hang
them to
around with
vote.
people who get politically active, So,
Well, I
most of
mean,
the-
okay, I'm not saying to hang around with like people you know in your life. I mean, you must have like some family members or friends.
well,
or something.
yeah.
You
I
know
mean,
what
I know of some people who get more involved in that kind of stuff where it's raw this person.
or at least
but-
maybe just throughout your history of not saying like right now.
Yeah.
Like yeah.
I don't know.
I don't. I always hear of people that they reluctantly vote for the right wing politician because that's the most conservative person out there. And then they get pissed off and
Yeah, or they
They do.
pick they choose which hills they're going to die on as like this is an issue that I can't budge on. Right? So
okay.
a lot of conservatives will like they might have opinions. They'd be like, "Yeah, Adam and Steve can get married, sure, whatever, I don't care. You want to smoke a joint? Yeah, do that." Well, yeah, we should let in whoever they want to do with America. America's a land of opportunity. Let's do that. And it's like, yeah, but you can't kill babies. So I got to vote, So like people will pick, right? Or they'll do something.
Yeah.
Or liberals will do the same thing, right? You might meet a liberal who's like, yeah, taxes, it all goes to the government. There's all this waste. You know what I mean? It's like they're just trying to tell everybody what to do all the time. It's like no. But then like they might have something like I don't know, what's a non-negotiable left-wing cause? I don't know. Like, or they might say something about abortion, right? Like I can't vote for these West Virginia Republicans because they right. So, or maybe you pick like a Second Amendment absolutist type people, who they might be pretty left. I know. I mean, I actually know some people like.
Thanks, Brian. This conversation does suck. Appreciate you, buddy. Sorry, that was too good not to share.
Yeah, we should just leave that up. So, yeah, people get their pet issues, and they choose their team based on that pet issue, regardless of the which is one of the many reasons that the team thing doesn't work, because there's a lot of issues.
Yeah. I don't know. See, this is part of the reason, like, when we were sort of kicking this around, like saying, oh, let's maybe criticize some conservative stuff or conservatives. I was like, I don't even know who that is anymore. I don't know what's out there. And I'm not trying to be like, flippant about it, but I really I don't feel like there's a conservative bent in the country that has any real cultural push. I don't think that's even a thing right now. Maybe it is in certain ways.
I think there might be an emerging, the phrase neocon has already been used for other
that's
people.
Gone.
Right. But a newer evolved version of the conservative species seems to be time will tell, right? Because the Trump thing kind of was like a brush fire through the whole camp.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see if, going into like 2024 and beyond that, if people try to go, did they learn the lessons from what the Trump era did and didn't do, and to come up with something new? Like, there might be a more conservatarian thing that comes out of this that people might find more palatable, specifically because a lot of the things that left-wing people hate about conservatives, a lot of conservatives are fine with leaving those things in the past, in some sense, right? So
yeah, for sure.
At least based on the people that I'm aware of, right? So, like, there's, in my mind's eye, I can imagine, and I don't know if there's anybody who exists like this, if it's DeSantis or any of these people, like, but they're like, yeah, small government, individual rights, free speech. You don't hear them talking about like moral, private issues like conservatives of the 80s and 90s did.
Okay.
Right. So if like like the Reagan, like, I'm trying to think about, like, you're not going to hear Ron DeSantis making something about like criminalizing weed. Right. So if I had to be optimistic about like maybe the ashes of what conservatism was after Trump kind of ran roughshod through the whole thing, maybe you'll get some of these people who will come out of it and be like, all right, look, if we want to come up with some sort of, if we really truly believe that this is kind of a smart way to run a country, right? Like, keep the government small, individual liberties, not throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to, like, there is a reason that nuclear families work pretty good. It's, a semi-traditional stuff, like, but making it palatable to everyone in a way that everybody can agree with. I don't think it's impossible. Now, whether they'll do that or not, whether they might just come out and be like, all right, well, we got to play to this base, so we're going to have to double down on.
Yeah, right. They would be smart to ride on like the COVID, anti-lockdown, bent of the Republican Party. If you want to call that conservative, I guess that's a good angle to look at too. Like the anti-lockdown, anti-mask, anti-mandate bent of the Republican Party. If that's considered conservative, they could ride that pretty hard.
They could reach people on that.
Right. And that would be, like you said, though, that would be more policy-based kind of stuff, real life, things that affect people directly, which would be a conservative, point of view typically, because, it's not typical in American life to have your business and your life shut down and have the government mandate medicines into your arm and medical procedures and masks and all sorts of stuff. But
From a
I-
strategic so go ahead.
Yeah, but no, I was say I would imagine that would be the winning way to go. Well, actually, I think you're probably gonna get that right there anyway. But like,
Well-
it would be it would be crazy for them to be like, you know what, we're really against pornography. Let's go. We'll go to campaign against pornography. Like, okay, you can, and like your base would agree with you, but it's not gonna get anybody jazzed up by any stretch of the imagination.
Right. So this is something I noticed a couple years ago. Like we've talked about the sort of wokeism as religion metaphor, right? Which a lot of people are waking up to, and they're noticing that it has all these similarities. But they're similar to like conservatism, right wingism, republicanism, whatever you call it. They tried the whole like, let's try to win over the country with moral issues.
Yeah.
Right. As opposed to policy issues. Like, and it didn't really work for them. Right. So now that's what the left is doing now. So it used to be that the Republicans, the conservatives were the party on like, this is right. You know, we know how things are supposed to be, and we can't let, bad ideas, we have to keep the bad ideas out.
Yep.
And we like people who are pushing, like, no, we've already figured out it's like, we got the right way. And it was just everything was a moral issue, right? So you didn't see conservatives getting up and they were not making stump speeches about like tax policy and trickle down. I mean, you see some of that, but like mostly it was a lot of like, we got to keep the prayer in schools, right? We got to whatever, and they're all moral, like conceptual, ideological issues, and
Fight
so
against the atheists and the homosexuals.
So that didn't work, obviously.
No, it did not.
And like drugs would be a good example, right? And because pretty much everybody's woken up to the fact that like, weed is not going to really be a big deal. It's kind of a weird corporate conspiracy about how it got outlawed in the first place, right? Or something like gay marriage.
I've listened to enough Joe Rogan to hear that. But
something like gay marriage, where like a lot of people were afraid that it was going to like tear society apart, and lo and behold, it's like, oh, no, it's pretty much what most people predicted, which was that gay men and women are getting married, and it's not destroying society.
They're divorcing at the rates of heterosexuals.
Yeah, if you want to go over there and pick some person and say I'm going to give them half my shit, then you go ahead and do that. So, conservatism clearly shifted from that, right? But the problem is that's what the left wing is doing that now. So their issues are all right and wrong, moral black and white issues. And they're kind of being a little hazy on when you start talking about like, now let's explain to me the numbers of how this is going to work, right? Explain to me how that works with like people's rights and stuff. And just like how conservatives used to, they go, it's not about that, it's about what's correct and what's more moral. And it's like, okay, well, conservatives tried that tactic and it didn't really work.
Yeah,
and I think
it's such an interesting turnaround. It really is.
I mean, you can see it in the same thing. We talked about this before, but like comparing Bill Clinton and Trump. Right? Conservatives tried in the 90s to be like, character matters.
Yeah.
We can't have somebody who's, philandering on his wife in the White House. You know what I mean? And they tried that, and they realized that ultimately people don't really care about that. They actually care about policy more.
Right.
Right? And then fast forward 20 years later, the liberal, progressive side or left-wing side, they didn't learn that lesson. They didn't realize why the conservatives lost that battle. They go like, oh no, we can't have a bad person in the White House, And the conservatives are like, we tried that. It doesn't work. You got to go. So it's, basically you got all sides being hypocritical now because it's a lot of the same, literally the same people.
The conservatives really weren't off the rails in the 90s. If they had pioneered the pussy hat, they would have done a lot better. That would have been like the million, like that would have worked. The March for Life could have done better marketing.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
So
it is crazy though to see like the left wing now, the woke stuff that wants to be like that, like, you're right, like taking the reins of culture and trying to cram that down on the rest of the country like the conservatives did in the 80s and 90s. It is like, it's such a stark flip-flop. It's just like, okay,
they watch Footloose and they think they're Kevin Bacon, but they're actually being John Lithgow.
Yes, right. Yeah, exactly. I love John Lithgow. Well, yeah, it's just crazy because like they want to purge ideas that are unpopular. They want to purge opinions from the public square, They want to silence people that say things that they don't like it just that's. And I remember just like I remember we having these arguments like for years that like cancel culture wasn't a thing, and it totally is, and it always has been a thing. But now it's just got a name for it. Like there was never the term cancel culture, but like the right wing was doing that before. And
Yeah, there are people throwing out Dixie Chicks albums and
yeah, no, it's the same exact thing. But like it's a stupid. You're right. That's so funny. It's just so stupid. But and again, this is what also makes it more difficult for me just to keep coming up with these terms are dumb, and to like I don't know. It's a hard thing to pinpoint a part of conversation, and actually, it really does drive me crazy. With people's like, "Yep, this is like a conservative show," or "I'm a conservative pundit. I'm conservative. Here's my conservative blog." I'm like, I don't know what you're even talking about. I really don't. Like, I still don't. I mean, I know I have a general vein about it.
Yeah.
But like as soon as they start talking, or they point out something in culture, or they put in something in politics, you'd be like, well, I can tell you why that's not conservative. Like. Traditionally, I would think, but then maybe I'm wrong because maybe it's a moving target, but maybe, and I think it always has been. It's just, I
think difficult. For me, I have two overarching points, and I think one area where conservatives tend to lose me, it's like I'll be listening to a conservative talk, and they'll say stuff about like, well, they might be complaining about like why all this extra spending is creating economic problems and inflation. I'd be like, yeah, I'm tracking with you there.
Mm-hmm.
Or why defunding the police is a horrible idea, or pick whatever topic that we might be talking about that I would agree with, and that it would make a person go, "Oh, Dan's a conservative." But then when they start using language about like, and the traditional American values, and it's like, well, these people are trying to destroy the fabric of our society, and they're trying to, it's un-American to do all this kind of stuff, and like that's where they start to lose me, because it's like the mechanics of how economy works, right? Or the mechanics of, what does the Second Amendment mean or not mean, and what is free speech, and all that kind of stuff, things that were like, it's just like when a person is coming at it from like, this is America and it must be protected. That's where I start to lose people, right? Or they hold these traditional things as like these bulwarks, and we have to preserve these things not because they're necessarily good, but it's because what exists. That to me is a blind spot. In the same way that an ultra progressive thing where it's like we just got to tear down the system. It's like, well, why? Like because basically the answer is because it's the system. It's like preserving or rebelling for its own sake is ignoring the specifics, right? So that's where I start to lose people because. And this is my second point, which is like, I tend to look at a lot of life like a science experiment. So, I've thought for a couple of years, like science is apolitical normally.
Yeah.
Right. Like the process of it. You try stuff out, you see what works, and it might work for a while. And then eventually somebody comes along with like a tweak, like, hey, what if we did this? And then that tweak might be horrible, in which case it doesn't really last, or it might be a great addition. You go, okay, good. This is now part of our scientific knowledge, and we gradually over time science works towards a better understanding of stuff.
Yeah.
Right. So I can't think of an example where like science has gotten worse on the main. Right. Now there are like fringe elements, where you got like corporate money coming into science, but like those things aren't ultimately going to last because the math doesn't work out.
Right.
Right. So stuff to do with government, like to me, it's all a science experiment. So that's why I think people need to be told that it's okay to take a buffet line approach, to stuff. So you could go, well, yeah, there's no rule that says like you have to be like a Second Amendment person. Like, well, okay, there's no rule that says like, well, this is my side, and now because I'm on this side, it tells me what I have to believe about these 15 issues.
Right.
Like there's no law about that, but people end up doing that because they self-sort themselves into a group because it's nice to be on a team and people want causes. But like, each one of those issues is its own little science experiment about like what's going to work better for people.
Yeah.
So
that's an unfortunate side effect of a two-party system generally.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, go on.
So the idea of like, there are some issues where conservatives get it right, and historically there's ones where they've gotten it wrong. Right? Conservatives were the ones who like generally tend to oppose like racial reforms and stuff like that, anything to do with that. And so like we look back with the benefit of hindsight and we go, yeah, okay, Strom Thurmond and you people who like opposed the Civil Rights Act and thought MLK was a rebel rouser, like, yeah, we're not looking very kind on you right now, or Jesse Helms, some of these people, right? So, like, that's an experiment.
Or Joe Biden.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
Yeah, he's lived long enough to be on both sides of a lot of issues.
Just kidding. Just kidding. I'm not.
So,
kidding, but
like, and then there's stuff that we try out, and we maybe we over tweak. Like, okay, the Great Society stuff, like Lyndon Johnson, all that stuff. We go, well, we'd have a war on poverty, right? So we're gonna throw all this money into it. Okay, that was an experiment.
Yeah.
Some people probably would have predicted that it wouldn't work out very well, but fair enough, right? And lo and behold, that didn't really help anything. So that was so like, or like we tried the whole like let's outlaw drugs. They tried outlawing booze, 100 years ago. Those were experiments that quickly were abandoned because it didn't produce anything that was good on overall for society. So, like, the idea of conservatism as when in doubt, preserve the existing status quo. I don't think it's healthy. That's like the people who that's the same mentality as people who put Galileo in prison. You know what I mean? Like, no, we've already figured out
for sure.
all that we know. We don't need to learn anything new. I was like, well, there's your problem. I'm not saying, right. But then you have people over here. It's like, because it's new, it's better. I'm like, well, that's not necessarily true either. Yeah. So a healthy society is like, and this, something you said earlier made me think of this. What does it people say? Like the ideal amount of it, you don't want no inflation. Would that be, is that what stagflation is? I don't know. Anyway, you don't want no inflation, but you don't want too much. So there's like an ideal number, where it's like 3%. I don't know, like 2.
No, I don't know.
I don't know what the exact number is, but like or like economic growth, right? Like, so there's a happy medium between the two things that's healthy. Just like
Maybe
going through life, feeling like you don't want to go through life being like I don't know anything, and then you're just like easily seduced by anything new, right? Because that's just going to lead you down all kinds of bad paths. But you also don't want to go through life like, well, I'm 18, I'm an adult, I got it all figured out. Like, okay, that's clearly stupid. So all of life, from the interpersonal level to a 330 million people country level, is all like finding a balance between preservation and whatever the opposite of preservation is, right? But if we could treat each issue as its own spectrum, we'd be much better off.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, for sure. Because like every little, like you said, the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, like those are little experiments and those parts of what it means to be an American or to be a human or to be a free person or to, I totally get that. That makes total sense. But like, yeah, and I get what you're saying, and I've always struggled with that too. Like the conservatives are like, you don't conserve everything. You've never, because that would be zero progress, which is terrible, obviously. But also, there is something to say that people like. I think it's I don't know who says this. I don't know if it's a Christian thing or it's a right wing conservative thing. To be like, well, like conservatives will look at a fence and be like, oh, there's a fence there. Let's talk about why that fence is there. And then like liberals or progressives like, well, there's a fence there. Let's tear it down. Like, okay, well, maybe just ask why that fence is there first before you tear it down. You may want to tear it down. It may be good to tear it down. So like a healthy conservatism might be like, okay, well, here's why I think we've always done this. And here's why I think that would make sense today. But that doesn't mean that it can't change. But I don't know if there's too many people that really think that way.
No, I don't think there are either, which is why every time you try to talk this way to people, they look at you like you grew a second head.
Yeah, that might be it.
Like I talk about like the idea of like, most people understand the concept of biological evolution, whether they believe in it or not. They understand the basic principle, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Traits that show up that provide an advantage generally tend to be
passed on. Yeah.
Right. They're passed on because they create a higher percentage of survival.
Yep.
So, I've had the idea for a long time that like moral principles can be looked at in the same way. Not exactly. It's not a one-to-one mapping, but like, there are, if we find moral principles that last for a long time, we might think they're bad, but we would be ignorant of the fact that, like, well, but there had to have been a reason why that lasted for so long.
Yeah,
right?
I
So
can see that.
because
Yep.
to say something like like men and women equality, like pretty much everybody believes in that now, even though it's hard to define that word. It's a whole can of worms. But like why did the subjugation of women persist for so long in human history? Even
Mhm.
though we might consider it to be morally bad, it must have provided some sort of functional role, you know. And that's a whole other can of worms, like or something else, right? Like the idea of like in the Old Testament, God says, "Don't eat shellfish." You know,
Right.
it's like they didn't really know. That's a kind of a strangely arbitrary thing to say,
Yeah.
right? But because people didn't understand there was like shellfish allergies and bacteria, whatever sort of medical reasons that people come up with, they go, okay, wow, that had a practical value, so it persisted. But then other things that have no practical value, like I think even the most Orthodox Jewish person is not going to like the stuff in like Leviticus and stuff where it's like the two colored
Oh
fabrics and
yeah,
like
that's right. Yeah, yeah.
you know what I mean? Like people quickly abandoned that because there was no function to it. So
Yeah.
the morality or like that the stuff as evolution, like that analogy breaks down though, because just because something naturally exists, doesn't mean that it's right. Right. So like lots of large scale violence and slavery existed for a long time. That doesn't make it
Yeah.
good. Right.
And that has
Because
that has evolutionary value for the people that can wield that power.
well,
For
right.
sure.
Like how many species are extinct now because of evolution? We look at it now as like nature conservationists. We're like, oh, that species is extinct. Oh, that's sad. Nature doesn't care.
No. Nope. Not at all.
Nature has no qualms about making some sort of panda extinct because they couldn't survive. Nature doesn't care. Right. So there's a limit. If you want to be more if you had to
Yeah.
define like the enlightenment of man, it's understanding our biological programming so that we can subsequently transcend it and choose to be better than it or different than it as we want.
Yeah.
But but with the recognition that we're still ultimately subject to like physics and biology.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing. The problem, I guess, you bring it back to the politics stuff. It's like, yeah, okay, you want to push boundaries, fine. See what happens. Right. Understanding that, like, no matter what utopic vision you come up with, you're still subject to the rules of like, this is how economics works. This
Right.
is how law and order works. Like, yeah, so right. So like, you still live in the real world.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, like whatever, even the American experiment. So that's what that is. That's like that in itself. The founding of the United States is an anti-conservative founding. It was throwing off the shackles of every historical precedent you had, and coming up with, a more of a decentralized, democracy
Right.
of
The
little,
English were the
little.
conservatives in that scenario.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's, but the conservatives of today would be like, well, hell yeah, of course that was a great thing to do. Like overthrowing the government is perfectly fine. I'm like, okay, that's fine.
Let's go to Chaz then.
Yeah, well, yeah, yeah, whatever. It's just,
Well, I mean, even defining what America is, you're going to get 5 different answers.
yeah, for sure.
Some people think that America is like a bunch of God-fearing people, raising their families and doing that, right? Whereas other people might think that America is about, the embracing chaos, right?
Yep.
And like other people might think that America represents like just a new version of colonialism, and just domination of the world and rampant capitalism and exploitation. So
Yeah,
it means a lot. If you say like they're trying to destroy America, okay, you're going to have to define what every word in that sentence means before that sentence makes any sense. Yeah.
that's very true. Yeah, gosh, almost every conversation could benefit from. All right, so we want to talk about something. Let's have a 3-hour conversation about what we mean before we even
Yeah.
start talking about it. Because like this is hard right here. Just trying to figure out what we're talking about. And you're just trying to define, just trying to pinpoint a concept. And I mean, I can critique like conservative ideas and like policies and things like that, but like nailing down what it is hard. It's
Yeah.
tough. Like I think we're finding that. You mentioned like the actually I mentioned the founding of the country, but like another thing that I get into it a lot, not a lot, but sometimes it comes up or used to, as like a Christian person, being like a libertarian or something along those lines, but then also being a Christian, you can say like I don't know. Like I would say, there's a certain points where it's moral and just to disobey the government, on like probably more levels than most people would be comfortable with. Not that I do, but I could if I wanted to. And people are
Yeah.
like, well, you can't as a Christian just like flagrantly violate the laws of the country you live in. That's not how God wants you to live. I was like, okay, so you disagree with the founding of America then, right? Those Christians that did that, they're like, well, no, that's different. I was like, actually, it's worse. They literally started a whole new government and said, get the hell out of here. And then they killed the people that wouldn't let them do it.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm not there. I'm not doing that. I'm just saying. It's just an interest. Again, it's for me that's a funny divergence.
Yeah.
The
If we're trying to
Christian
right.
conservative is this whole other thing, which
Yeah. Well, trying
We
to
don't
put
need- I
people
don't wanna
into
get into
little
that.
into little boxes is always going to fail. You're
Yeah.
right. So the solution to these problems is to stop looking at people as parts of groups and looking at each person as an individual cocktail of, a synthesis of their own hang-ups and their beliefs and their upbringing and all this kind of stuff.
yeah,
All of a sudden now it does, because a lot of this stuff does look like a contradiction, right? Like,
And it may be,
these people say,
actually.
right, it only really is a contradiction when you're looking at them as groups. When you look at each person as an individual and you recognize, well, yeah, people contradict themselves all the time because we're all like weird. We got problems and histories and pasts, and
right.
then it doesn't make
Yeah.
it necessarily any less complicated, but it makes it less like it's an easier concept to get your head around.
Yeah.
Once you
Well,
you have to radically accept that, like, yeah, everybody's fucked up in their own way.
Well, it's tough too when you're trying to pinpoint, or you're trying to throw on the conservative jacket onto somebody and go, all right, now you have to believe these things because in my mind this is what that's supposed to mean. If they go, well, in my mind that's not what it means, we go, well, then you're not a conservative. I'm like, well, I'm thinking I am a conservative. I don't know why you don't think that. So like that just makes it more difficult. So yeah, like everybody does have their own little things, and it's not necessarily that you. I mean, I'm sure actually everybody does contradict themselves 1,000 times, but like hopefully when you realize that, you can either reconcile it or you can change the one thing that's in contradiction and try to put them in line, or you can live with the contradiction. I mean, there are some tensions that you're just gonna have to live with in life, but like yeah, it's a hard thing to try to really pigeonhole somebody into a straight line of thinking. And then when you're using terms that are so nebulous and not pigeonholable, like you're a conservative, like, oh, all right, maybe
Yeah.
go ahead. Like, and I see why people use those terms though, because it does encompass a bunch of stuff probably. Now for you and me, we would get to a point where we're just like, all right, now I'm it's now the scale is tipped. Like I can't use that term anymore. But you could still use that term for me on several things. Then I wouldn't be offended if you're like, you're conservative and you're thinking in this way. I'd be like, okay, yeah, no, I am. That's fine.
Yeah.
I don't. But when you use the overarching term, I'd be like, no, I'm not that. I have some of that. I am not that.
Yeah.
I am not an
Right.
animal. Blah, blah.
Well, and maybe even the recognition that a certain amount of diversity is not only okay but preferable,
Probably.
right? So, like, again, talking about nature, like, in a population, like, there's, you know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't want, so you look at a population like bears or something. You don't want every bear to be the same size, right? Or like that's why we have so many different species on this planet, because like different characteristics suit different environments better, right? Say you had a desert and there was just a bunch of bears there, well, those bears would die because they depend on the other animals and the plants to create an ecosystem, right?
Mhm.
So if you look at the world like ideological, like not just like a population of everything that needs to be one way, but like as an ecosystem, then you could make the case that like conservatives should be happy that progressives exist and vice versa, because progressives are good. And this is a Jordan Peterson thing he's talked about a lot of times, where it's like you need the people who are looking out for the people at the bottom, right? Conservatives, a lot dyed in the wool conservatives tend to not be very good at noticing the people, for whatever reason. They're good at they're good at math and they're good at finances and logistical stuff, maybe building buildings or whatever, right?
Mhm.
And then there are other people who are like just more people oriented, that or whatever, tend to be more looking out for people at the bottom of and they're not the kind of people you want building a bridge, right? So we need both. So we absolutely need people who are going to like healthily, it's like working out or something. Like a little bit of resistance produces
Yeah.
strength, right? So you need people pushing the boundaries and making us question things. And then if somebody asks a question and you don't have a good answer to it, it's like, well, why don't I have a good answer to that? That should should make you think about some stuff, right? But we also need people who can make the trains run on time, right? Because if everybody was
Yeah.
sitting here going, well, what about this? What about this? Then no work would ever get done. So,
Yeah.
And again, that comes down to like people who are cool, who are chill, I think subconsciously recognize that. I know people who are, liberal, who are like, they don't have a problem with the fact that other people exist that might think differently about how taxes work.
Yeah. It's yeah. Interesting. Like you mentioned, kind of like a social evolution of morality or social constructs, evolution of social constructs or something like that, and like using, I don't know, like women's rights or use women voting or subjugation of women. You can use that term.
Yeah.
However, if the posture that women have now, I'm not saying this is a bad thing at all. Like for women that they have careers, they work, they spend little time in the home, they raise their kids at a minimum level. 8,000 years ago, that wasn't really possible.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's that necessary requirement of women not to be out in the front of culture doing the kind of things or being the manipulators of politics or being involved in that, because they're just literally too busy propagating the species and keeping families alive.
Right.
And then as we progressed as a people with technology, like labor saving stuff, things in your home, the ability to travel, the ability to work, it's become much easier, and then it's more reasonable and more expectant for women to want to be able to do other things. And I'm not saying one's right and one's wrong,
Yeah.
vice versa, but it's just there are reasons, and they can change, and that's not a bad thing to look into.
Exactly.
So,
I mean, it's all part of the experiment, right? So, 5,000 years ago, you could say, like, okay. One of the arguments for why we want gender equality is because if we say it's 50 years ago, and we don't want women in the workforce, well, now we're depriving our workforce of the potential intellect and ideas and perspective that 50% of the population comes from. That's a horrible idea, right?
Yeah.
And so that's part of the reason that it, not only for like sort of moral issues, but that's all like, that's one of the reasons that it happened, was because people started to realize, oh, wait a minute, we got half the population here. They have skills and perspectives that we want. Now, 5,000 years ago, the idea that you would tell people, you'd be like, okay, you're missing out on the perspective of 50% of the population. He's like, well, we don't have the luxury of that. Exactly. As you said, we're just trying to function, right? Yeah. We're living in huts and teepees and stuff and, caves and, okay, my wife here might have a great idea, but she's busy keeping these 8 children alive and not.
Good luck getting up the warlord chain up to old Caesar there and like making it, getting involved. Yeah.
Right. So that was a cost benefit. Yeah, we're missing out on half the ideas, but we don't have that luxury. Yeah. Now we have that luxury. We have all this technology and medicine and all these different kinds of things. So, but now, so now potentially comes at a cost.
Yeah, I was going to say. There
right.
You go.
So the cost of the nuclear family, we're going to have to figure out, is that a cost worth paying? Right. Yeah. So you put.
We're in the middle of that experiment right now.
Yes, exactly. So you introduce contraception and all these ways that, people don't have to necessarily be stuck at home for all of their golden years or their prime years raising a bunch of kids. I was like, okay, but now you end up with, higher rates of depression. You end up with kids who like got raised by television or, nannies and stuff, and you're increasing government presence, right? As, which is a whole rabbit hole about like why single motherhood is what it is, So every development has a cost. So we're in the middle of the experiment.
Yep. That's what I was going to get to eventually.
Yeah. I just said it in a long-winded and rambling way.
No, it's all good. Yeah. It's just, it's an interesting thing. And then to pin yourself as someone who goes, at this point in time, I'm going to conserve how we're at. So like if you're like a new political baby coming up right now, and be like, all right, I'm conservative, so therefore, critical race theory is great, or critical race theory shouldn't be taught in school. It depends who you're talking to. Like women shouldn't be outside of the home, or the nuclear family's disappearing, and that's bad. It'd be like, all right, so which one are you? Like, I don't know. It's like I sent you that picture of the people like making posters of the 3 dudes who were shot by Kyle Rittenhouse and calling them heroes.
Yeah.
You're like, maybe, I guess, but like I'm not part of that echo chamber where the guys that were burning down a town were heroes. But I mean, if that's what you want to label them now, but like, so where are you now? Like, it's just, where are you in this country, and where do you slot in? And that even just is a whole nother freaking wrinkle in how all that kind of stuff works. And I don't really want to get into all that at the moment, but it's just, I don't know where.
Yeah, those kind of things are just such low
that stuff.
vibrational versions of real issues. Like
You think?
well, it just makes you. I don't like it when examining an issue makes me just not even want to delve into it. Like
Fair enough.
that's a sign to me that an issue is like, oh, this is just like I try to, like, I want to genuinely like, just taking Rittenhouse thing. I want to genuinely understand, like, what is it? Am I missing something here? And so I'll, like, scroll through comments of people. Like I literally went to say, I tried to, like, okay, who do I know that's like way on this side? What are they? Because Facebook's not showing me what they're posting, right? So
Right.
I literally had to search people's names and go, all right, that guy's kind of a liberal. I want to see what memes he's posting. And I'll click onto it and try to find all the comments and be like,
Yeah.
what are these people watching this? I just don't understand, like, where they're getting their information. Like, am I missing something? Like, is there?
Yeah.
It just makes me want to be like, oh God, like,
Yeah, though, I mean, I've seen where they're getting their information, and I've watched some of that kind of stuff, and it's just,
they just
I don't get where those people are getting there. Like, I don't know how newscasters and commentators are coming up with that kind of thing. What blows my mind is, I was just in general, and this is just speaking to what you're saying, like saying that this is like a white supremacist like victory if Kyle Rittenhouse gets off. I was just like, but he killed a bunch of white people. I was like, this makes no sense. It was all white people involved, and I feel like this is just common sense, and you can't get around this. But what it is that people will see. This goes back to, was it a riot or was it a protest? And the answer is yes. It was both.
Yeah.
Like during the day it was protest. At night it was riots. So I mean, but like, you can't say everyone there was a rioter and everyone there was a protester. Now at night, when people are running around burning shit and breaking into buildings and flipping over cars, that's a riot. Sorry. And that's when all this happened.
It's a big group of people. A bunch of individuals being individuals.
What they're saying is these people died in the service of racial justice protests, is what they're saying. So therefore, it's a white supremacist.
Find me a picture of Rosenbaum out there with a picket sign talking about equal. I mean,
he was out there yelling the N-word. So I don't know, but again, that's what. But I legitimately tried to figure it out. I was like, what the hell are these people talking about? So I did what you did. I went and looked at spots and I read comments, and I follow a bunch of different people on Twitter, so it was easier for me to see kind of the opposite side of things. But it's just it's
they literally think he was like, I say they. I'm not trying to paint everybody with the same brush, but like,
sure,
lots of people literally think he was some white person who was offended by the BLM concept, and got his gun and went out there to stir up some shit.
Yeah,
and
yes,
like, and that he provoked these people into chasing him so that he could shoot them.
Yeah, because
Trump told him to, in no uncertain terms. Like, that's
right.
Right, like, that's what people think.
Freaking what's her face, Anna Kasparian or whatever from the Young Turks, which I don't really follow them all that much, but I see their stuff.
Generally can't stand them.
Yeah, no, neither can I. Especially Cenk Uyghur's an asshole, but like,
she kind of a big asshole.
Yeah, but she was just kind of like, you know what? I think I might have changed my mind, and I think he's probably going to get off, and there's probably more self defense here than I considered. But like, that's after, this is like, what? This was like, what, how many? This is over a year ago. Like, did you not? It's the same video from a year ago. I was like, how did you change your mind? Like, what convinced
and
you?
Nobody,
like,
right? And nobody seems to recognize the fact that, like, maybe we should stop reporting on things before we know stuff.
Oh, good.
Because
God.
the whole,
no
specifically Kenosha riot started because the media blew up the whole Jacob Blake story.
Yeah.
And before anybody had any facts, they're burning shit. And I'm just like, at what point? How many people have to die? How many businesses have to be?
Sorry, I don't mean to laugh. That's so true. Yeah.
Like how many billions of dollars of damage have to be done before somebody in the media takes just an ounce of responsibility?
Yeah, man. I don't know. We're a ways away. So
I don't know.
yeah, I don't want to. I'm not. I don't want to start riffing on that. But yeah, I'm just saying it's a weird time to even like pick a side, because how do you? I don't even know. It is so like dystopian and so like 1984 and doublespeak and like Ministry of Truth. Like who you listen to is like what truth you subscribe to.
Well, I've been saying for years, it's like everybody reads 1984 and they think it describes the other guy.
The other guy. Yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, it's like that old I'm trying to think. I forget which Bible story it is. Is it the prodigal son? I don't know. There was this anecdote people would say that's like everybody reads that story and they think that like they think they're the dad in the story. It's like, no. You're probably the son who wasted everything, right? That's who you should be identifying with in the story, right? Or maybe you're the jealous younger brother or something like that.
Usually, the ones the what a twist Bible stuff I've seen is that like
or you're the Good Samaritan also.
Yeah, you're not going to be that guy. You're going to be the Pharisees walking by, and generally you're going to be the older brother who's jealous and angry. I mean, it's whatever.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's another Jordan Peterson thing. There's that photo of like all the Nazis and they're all hiling, and then there's the one guy who hasn't. Everybody likes to think they're like, no, statistically, you would be the guy. Nazi. You would be one of the other guys hiling. You would not be the one guy resisting. So don't flatter yourself.
Yeah, that must be a fun conversation to have with like college students who are like all idealistic and they think they're on top of the world, and be like, oh yeah. So how many think you'd stand up to like the Nazi regime and like you would push back against the SS soldiers? You'd be like, nope. You'd be shoveling people into boxcars too.
Yeah,
it's exactly. You'd be turning in your Jewish neighbors. You'd be just like them. And there's the sad truth to that. And like, yeah, whatever. You notice a little bit of that, and whatever. I'm not gonna get into all that, but like you can see cultural pushes that people just fall into with little to no critical thinking behind it. Not to the extent of Nazi Germany, just even smaller ones. And that can still be concerning. So,
but right, it's like we have these examples of how things can go horribly wrong, hopefully as cautionary tales, right? Yes. But it's not like a Gina Carano situation where you can't even.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah,
you can't make a comparison of. So what you're saying is Republicans are the same as Jews in Warsaw. She's like, no,
retard. What I'm saying is you can't other people and slot them into categories.
You idiot.
Yeah, it's a metaphor, fool. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like the I don't know. We've talked about that a million times, I bet. But like just the othering of others and the othering of a group of people and saying they are the problem, they're the issue, they're what's stopping me from being safe, secure, healthy, prosperous, and they need to be defeated. It can be ugly. So
yeah. Well, it's groups are bad. I mean, my Bill Burr reference of the day will be what is it? He had some bit where he was talking about like people trying to cancel Bryan Cranston because like he was in this movie and he played a paraplegic,
right?
And they're like, why didn't you get somebody who was actually a paraplegic? He's like, it's called acting.
Yeah.
It's like when it's like, hey, when you murdered that guy, why didn't you actually murder him? It's like, because I didn't want to murder. It's like, I wasn't an actual. He didn't. It's like, it's all. Anyways.
Yes, it's
a way to take things way too literally.
Yeah. Direct proportionally casting roles for any kind of group would be hilariously impossible. But here we are. Things we worry about.
Yeah.
All right. It's been over an hour.
Yeah.
I'm tired.
Me too.
Good deal. We'll get back on more topical stuff next week, maybe.
I'm sure
we should have a talk about. Oh, I'm sure we should have the ruling in the Rittenhouse trial. They should be back by next week. I'd be shocked if they take over a week to deliberate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of course, there might not be much to say after that. After the country burns to the ground, we might not have internet next week. Everything will be over. Infrastructure dead. Someone's gonna release a electromagnetic bomb and just shut us all down. It's over.
Like Snake Plissken.
Well, I'll be better for it. Yes, exactly.
All right.
Escape from USA. All right. Ending the podcast. Where is the thing? There it is. Nope, it's gone.
And